I've always trained or coached my team to say, if you have something to say, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask, right?
Welcome to All Things Design, the podcast where I speak to top design leaders about how design drives digital transformations. I'm Joe Woodham, founder of Tori, Australia's leading design consultancy. We work with top brands to embed amazing designers into their teams. Our designers create experiences that millions of people use every day. Today, I'm speaking with Andy Warboys, VP of Design at Learnosity. Andy has transformed teams from pixel-focused contributors into business-savvy powerhouses. His journey offers a rare glimpse into what it takes to align design with real-world business goals.
Thanks, Joe. It's good to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Now, first question. Wanted to, delve into your experience in aligning design teams with business objectives. Where did you want to start? It's a pretty big topic.
Sure. So I suppose looking back in the industry, design teams or design functions in businesses have always cried to have a seat at the table, to have a voice, and to have some sort of representation within the roadmap. They understand what customers' needs are if they're close with their product management team. That is where it all kind of starts from for me. And I think that once that door unlocks and you've either can work your way through the chain of command, or you have a great relationship with your manager and the management, that's the way to build alignment. And you have to foster that. It doesn't come overnight. So if you're on that journey, getting the seat at the table for me is the key that unlocks that possibilities with the design function staying aligned with the rest of the business.
Can I dig into that? Because I find it fascinating, right? And make sure if you like today's episode, hit subscribe and give us a thumbs up. As designers become designers, their focus is on solving customer problems. But to get that seat at the table, you have to understand the business requirements behind the customer problems. You have to be able to sell design to the business and be understanding what the changes actually mean. How did you get to that point where you could communicate on the right level to the business and understand the business objectives to be able to communicate that to the design team?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a mindset shift with regards to who know your audience, right? So day in, day out, we're problem solvers, right? So tell us your pain points and your friction. What is it that's not working right now? What do you need? So that's your designer mentality when you're interacting with customers. When you need to then sell that value back into the business of why there'll be a benefit of doing said piece of work and why it should be on the roadmap, you have to talk business instead of, wouldn't this be desirable? Wouldn't this be usable? Because those people talk numbers, they talk time, they talk what is the benefit here for the business. So it wasn't an easy adaptation. I had no official training, and I think that's quite characteristic of when a designer moves into said role, into like management, then leadership. There's no, here's the best beautiful pathway laid out for you, just take one step at a time. You're generally picked up like the Google Maps little guy right in the bottom of you, and you're dropped in the ocean, and it's like sink or swim. So if you've got the right headset and you do have a bit of a mentor, whatever department it could be in the business, if there's someone ahead of you that can just impart some of that wisdom to say, this is what these people need and what they're interested in learning and knowing about, you'll be in a better space to have those conversations and not feel like you're running out of oxygen. So for me, I was given the opportunity, and like I say, it wasn't an easy step to make, because when you're on the tools, you're producing, you're crafting, you're creating outputs. It's a bit of a different game when your main job is to hold meetings with others and circulate information so everyone is aligned and on the same page. So when you're not outputting designs, as it were, that's the first hurdle to overcome. And then you build yourself up to holding proper conversations with those at the top of the business who give you the grilled questions,
Well, it's a big shift, right? Like from talking about the nice to haves or how you can change something for the better use of a user to talking numbers, the cost of things and why you're doing things and what the implication to the business is. But you talked about finding someone within the business to sort of take you on that journey. You started relatively fresh or cold with no idea. Like, who within the business took you under their wing and kind of showed you this is how we communicate, or this is why we communicate this way?
Yep. So that chap would have been my first manager, who was at the time, evolved to be director of product. So there was no one above me in design. This is how we do things here in the design department. So I was leading that from the get-go as a team member of one. So I had him really, he had a soft spot for design. He really knew what worked well versus what didn't. And he had very much an empathy there. So I was very lucky to fall under his management and his guidance. And this chap could sell ice to Eskimos. He was very articulate and he just knew how to communicate very clearly with not much ambiguity around. So I was lucky enough to fall under the management of that chap for, 8 years or so. And that really did give me the solid grounding that I needed. There was no ridicule. There was no, you should know this stuff by now. It was always supportive. And, he would tell me and guide me off executive summary, Andy. These folks don't want 10 pages. They want the goods and the why. And that's the stuff you should be asking of your team so that you're empowered to then relay that information back. So I was very much in a fortunate position there to have that guidance and the mentor internally.
And how, obviously having that person there, how did that play into how you went into those conversations with maybe the senior leadership team to be able to communicate to them confidently that you were adding value?
So we would collaborate and be in conversations. We'd be at the whiteboard, he and I, my manager, and we would be responsible for crafting, I suppose, from the very early wireframes. He was very technically minded, so that's where I was weakest. So I had a lot of ground to cover there. When we're all in the office together, throwing things up at the whiteboard, sticky notes, getting messy, right? Scrapboard style. So he and I would just build up this rapport where we were sort of like dancing to get to the outcome we were looking for. So when we went into those conversations with others that we were having to then resell that back internally, he and I had such a close alignment that there was never a disagreement between the two of us. Well, from time to time we would have disagreements, but it would be healthy ones, right? We would be challenging the work. It wouldn't be I'm right, you're wrong, let's move on. It would be how do we make the best of the situation that we've got, because this is the restrictions that we're working with. So as soon as the two of us would cover ground there, we would lean on each other's skill sets when we went into those meetings, and they were generally very fruitful.
How good. And how does that relate? Obviously being able to do that in good old days when you could actually go into the office and do that in person, right? Bit harder to get people in the same room now. How did that work with you? And do you have a team now? Have you grown the team to be able to communicate that back to the team?
Correct. I do have a team now. We're, funny enough, the biggest we've ever been. There's 6 of us on the team now. We are globally distributed. So there's 3 of us locally in Australia, New South Wales, and there's 1 in Scotland and 1 in Dublin in Ireland. So trying to bring everybody together to replicate that in the same room vibe is a feat in itself. You've got digital whiteboards, you've got the tools that can try to get you so far, but I tell you, the silence of when you drop a question in and you're trying to elicit a response from someone, and there's an apprehension to answer because you can't feel the vibe via a screen. So that's still been a challenge that I see of hey folks, this question isn't a trick. I'm genuinely looking for an answer or your thoughts, your opinions. We do multiple sessions a week to make sure that the team are aligned, because they're the ones doing the great work now. And I have to just relay from a management perspective, the high level direction and the strategy. So we do multiple calls a week out of normal hours to bring everybody together.
How did you find transitioning from a hands-on design role into a leadership design role?
Bumpy. The imposter syndrome's real if you care about your role and the business you're working for, because if you've got skin in the game, you've got a passion there, you want to be seen and you want to deliver value. You don't want to be seen to have some senior level within a business where people are raising eyebrows of what the said person do, right? So if you have this imposter syndrome going on, I was always coached, that's a good thing, Andy. It means that you care. So there's a lot of overcoming that of, am I good enough? I haven't been officially trained. I can give my opinion as best as the next person. But then you realize over time that you're accruing valuable experience with how the systems work, how it's interconnected. You can't train that in a short period of time, right? So the road to holding those kind of conversations was trial by fire, I would say. Again, dropped in on those, and do your best. I was given a chance. I'll say that, instead of being someone that just pushes pixels and is at the end of the chain. Many members on my team have always said, Andy, we need to come further on in the process. We need to be further upstream, because by the time all this stuff filters down, we know that the solution that's been provided that we have to then go and design isn't actually fit for purpose, or it's not the best it could be. So those parts were really, I had to get to grips with and get my team involved sooner rather than at the end of the process, when folks thought that we were just there to push out pixels. So there was a culture shift. And again, like I say, I was given the opportunity to prove that design had a part to play. And the guys at the top, I always have respect for them, that they have, design is super important to us. And, we can talk about indexing and all the top players in the S&P 500 or whatever term you want to use. If they're design led, they tend to outperform.
They do. There's some pretty good stats on this. So this is my whole MO at the moment. Is we specialize in working with companies doing digital transformations, and it used to be tech led, right? And they've proven that companies that are design led when going through a digital transformation are like 70% more efficient at the end of the process. So it's a scary stat. But circling back to something that you said, you obviously team are comfortable enough to come to you and push back going, hey, we need to be earlier on in the process. How, obviously going on that journey into management, how did you create that safe space for your design team to be able to take critiques or come back to you and push back on certain decisions?
Great question. Look, I'm a people first manager. So look after the people, look after your team will look after you. So I've always tried to encourage them to step into the space, right? If we want these things, you have to use your voice and be opinionated. So I've always trained or coached my team to say, if you have something to say, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask, right? So if you want these things, or there's an expectation that design should be doing these things within the business, I want to hear it. It's that's the problem, is trying to instill confidence in your team members for them to be able. There might be some subliminal fear of sounding stupid, or I should probably know this, so the moment I open my mouth to ask a question, I'm going to look like an idiot. But that's one thing to it's like the psychological safety, right? It's Brené Brown is, a master of her craft, and I've read a couple of her books now, and if I could poke the management in the ribs and say, can we get Brené Brown in?
And their bottom dollar, because I'm sure she's not cheap.
You got it. Andy, she's on YouTube. Just play a video. So it's very much that making sure people feel confident, comfortable, and empowered to share their opinions, because I don't want people on my team that don't challenge or don't ask any questions. They just sit and nod. And I'm looking for people that aren't settled for just the status quo. How can we improve? And there's boundaries, there's a balance. It's not always like push. You've got to work with what you've got, and where the opportunities lie, try and push that forward. So it really is making sure that people feel like they're on an equal level with everybody else. There's sometimes either a power imbalance, or there's vocal members of the team and very quiet ones. So you have to draw those ones in that otherwise wouldn't say anything. So there is certainly something to be said for the personalities. Get to know your team. That's what I would say. On a personal level, as well as you're an employee, try and go a bit above and beyond of knowing who they are, what makes them tick, know their personality type. There's a great tool out there, 16 personalities, right? So I get any new member who joins my team to take that review of themselves, and then we all get to know said new member over the course of a month or two, and then everybody has a guess about what personality they are based on that tool, and then we all have a bit of fun guessing, and that's a good way to then stage conversations with them when you need to try and draw them out of a quiet space and things.
I love that. That's really good advice. I think getting to know my team personally helps me be able to work with them. So I think it's a really good piece of advice. Going back to the topic, how do you align your team with business needs?
Yeah, so Learnosity is a company that we built APIs, right? So we built learning tools in the form of APIs. So that's the landscape of authoring content, digital content. So traditionally they were in like textbooks, right? Now everything can be done online. So we have authoring products, we have assessment delivery products, and then reporting. The original business need was we created a product for product builders, right? So you might have an LMS or a system of your own that you needed to ingest something else. So like an assessment engine. You didn't want to go and build your own. You wanted to license one and embed that. That's where Learnosity came in. So we're a toolkit for educational businesses, like publishers, things like that. Then you've got the other side of the house, which is actually a turnkey solution and end user platform. It's got everything there. So there's two mentalities, there's B2B and B2C, and we operate on both of those. So the mindset is different. So to keep everyone aligned and singing the same song, we adopted the SAFE methodology, scaled agile frameworks. So once a quarter, everybody comes together and it's madness for about 4 days, where you've got Australia, the UK, India, America, literally most time zones known to man. We try to bring them together, and it is staggered across that 4 or 5 days. But SAFE is the way that we try to do the lengthy quarterly planning, so we have an idea of what that roadmap is to bring everybody together and raise any red flags. But it's quite an undertaking.
Yeah, I bet. How do you get everyone, like, obviously digitally if you're getting so many time zones, but how do you get everyone on the same, like how many hours would you be having crossover between any of those geographies?
Right. So England and, well, yeah, with the UK region and Australia, we probably get 3 hours if we're lucky before it starts to get, tired brain. I've been on all day doing planning in my own time zone.
Yeah.
So we get that. India and UK have a better crossover. So there is a small window where we get 3 time zones probably together.
Yeah.
Get your priorities raised right now, get in a room and hash it out. But we use Miro. Miro is the whiteboarding tool where we basically have all the boards there, and you can see it's at roll the clock back 10 years and the technology wasn't there, but seeing 60 different cursors. Right. Even 3. It's great to see people engaged, involved, moving around. So Miro, Zoom, documentation, Jira, we use all well-known software to try and get us through.
Yep. Now, you mentioned OGSM. Talk me through that model.
Objectives, goals, strategies, and measures. So once a year, we will refresh those to have that compass that everyone needs to point towards. The company as a whole at the very top has its OGSM, and then all the functions underneath like product, design, technology, people, and culture. Everyone has their own OGSMs, and they all, to some degree, point towards the business one, which is what we need to be additive towards. So that's objectives, what are we working towards? What are strategies to get there? What do the goals look like of those? And how are we going to measure that?
We use something very, very similar in our business. So we do that as a leadership team, set our 3-year goals, and then we'll set our 12-month goals, and then we'll break that down into quarters and weekly OKRs across different business units. And from a communication perspective, it just makes things so much more efficient, I think. And everyone knows where they're going, what they're doing, and how they're doing it. So it makes life easier. Was it, like, with your team, like, how have they adapted to this? And obviously you've got a seat at the table. So do you sit with the leadership team to come up with the original strategy or vision and how design feeds into that?
Yeah, in a nutshell, that's right. So because design at Learnosity, our function is wrapped up under product. So we are a function of product. So most of it would be product led, but where I come in would be to shape some of those for how design can contribute. So sometimes we will have line items within that model of the OGSM specific to design, but most of them are supportive of the product goals that we're looking to achieve. So where my team would then say, well, Andy, where do we exist in the OGSM? How are we being realized within the business? It would be then on me to relay the OGSMs back down to my team members. We would have a briefing session. They'd ask questions. And then I would then stage those conversations back up with leadership to say, can we get this part changed? Because, as a whole, my team believe it's important for us to change said goal here because the success measure doesn't meet that criteria.
So with your design team, you've got 6 designers. Are they all embedded in different product teams? Do they have their own OGSM? Hopefully I got that right.
You did. Yep.
Good.
We used to have cross-functional teams where a designer was embedded. Now, because of the ratio, and this is quite industry standard, that we're not one-to-one with an engineer, for example. So
Yeah.
we have to move based on the planning that we've done and the OGSM. We have to move a designer to the team where the priority is needed most, and that is within the circumference of the planning event, right?
Yep.
So not every team has its own OGSM. Every team works towards their function. Either if they're engineers, they work towards a technology OGSM. It might be like something along the lines of, we will ensure that no vendor that we're using is out of service, etc., etc. So that'll be what, that's not a feature that they're building, but they'll make sure that the technology that we're using doesn't fall behind and is no longer supported. And then we've got like an open door where either attacks can happen, or we're just letting down parts of the software. Design and product are no different. AI is heavily being involved, of course, these days.
Interesting. How are you using AI at the moment?
Content
Specifically from the
generation.
design team.
Yeah, right. So content
I'm an
generation
AI
thing.
fanboy, by the way. So I love this topic.
Well, in a nutshell, let me see if I can break it down. Because the product, as I mentioned earlier, we have like an authoring section to it. So you can, traditionally was, I have a published textbook on science year 10. How do I get that in Learnosity so I can serve digital assessment to all my students across all these different schools, etc.? Now, AI has been brought on to lessen the load of the content creation. So either a teacher or a professional author, you can serve it some command and say, I would like you to create me 10 questions on the life cycle of a frog. And then 5 seconds later, you've got 10 different MCQ questions that are all shaved in a slightly different way, right? Yep. And the correct answers are already there, what we call distractor rationales. So the reason why the incorrect answer is incorrect. All these things are there to lessen the burden on the creation of content workflow. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum, which is AI reporting, so grading. So we have a new flagship product that we're about to launch called Feedback Aid, and that is like a second grader. So a human could not defer, but it could get a sense check from the AI tool that we've spent the last 6 months or more priming and iterating on to get a validation of 10 different graders and how they've responded to manual question types. You've got auto scored, which is your MCQ, and that's binary, so it's either incorrect or correct. But then you've got your subjective ones, which are essays, etc.
How involved is you or the design team getting in, I guess, building those products and implementing them from
the get-go? From the get-go, yeah. So one of my senior product designers has extensively studied the topic of AI and knows large language models and how to prompt engineer. Like, if you can hire well, your team will be highly functioning. And this team member, there's no stopping her, right? If you give her a topic, she went and studied data visualization on her own because she just understood the gap that existed in her skill set. And there was one project coming up and she just took herself off and studied it, bought a subscription to some mentorship. And it's great to see someone thrive and be hungry to learn more. To answer your question, my team, as I alluded to before, we want to be early on in the process, Andy. So I'm like, the door is open, get involved. Speak with the product manager and I'll loop you into some of the leadership conversations where I can. And they're very respectful of that because they've been listened to, they have a voice, and they want to take something and make it better.
How do you foster that in the team to ensure that, well, for that example, she's gone off and done her like a course outside of work just to learn a new skill set that she likes? How do you foster that within the team?
So each team member will be part of projects as time goes by. It's what they're here to do. But then they'll also have personal career goals as well. So, we'll sit down 2 official times of the year, twice a year, and it'll be, what do you want to learn? Where do you want to grow? What skill sets do you want to evolve? And we'll do sort of like an audit of, well, I'm really great over here, but I don't know enough about AI. So I want to go on a course to learn a little bit more about how that works. So the company then sponsors those sort of educational programs. And sometimes you'll have a proactive team member that is more forthcoming. I don't know enough about this area, Andy. Can I use some of my budget to go off and get a course? So you've, again, depending on the personality type of your team member, some will be thriving to say, please give me more. I'm on to my next book and I want to learn the art of negotiation. The other person needs a little bit more of a prompt or a steer towards, you're really thriving in this area, but it'd be great if we could get you onboarded with these skills. For example, accessibility is key for making sure that our products are accessible to the guidelines.
How good. I'm a huge fan. All of our team have a budget for learning and development, and it's something that we push very hard. So we make sure that people are spending their budgets and trying to always develop. We're a consultancy, right? So if I'm embedding one of our designers on site with one of our clients, we want to make sure that they are rounded and they're developing their skill set so they can add maximum value. People love learning. So if you're hiring right, the people that you're bringing on are always evolving as a designer.
There's a saying that comes to mind. Two people are having a conversation and one says, hey boss, what if we invest in our employees and then they leave? And the reply was, well, what if we don't invest and they don't leave? Then you're left with a team that aren't thriving. They're not growing and learning and adding more value. So problem.
I agree. And the more people learn, the better they are at doing their jobs. They find new ways of creating efficiencies, right? So going back to the example there is there's people that can bring a whole new element or new degree to their job by learning a new skill that enhances what they already do.
Right.
Cool space.
For sure.
In terms of your design team, organic evaluation of a designer, talk me through that.
Organic evaluation of a designer.
So how do people become individual contributors within their product teams or on the product that they're working on? If they're only going in for a short period of time at the right part of the process, how are you enhancing them to be that organic individual contributor?
Got you. Okay. So my team are hired as product designers, in brackets UX UI. So we do the whole spectrum from the research with a product manager, who our customers are, the personas, getting them on calls to say we're about to embark on said project. What might you need from that? Right from the very early parts through to delivery. There are different levels of competency within that. You can't expect someone to be a gun in all the areas. So depending on where they're weighted, I will make a judgment call to say, hey, designer one, you've been an absolute star on previous projects around this area. There's another one coming up. You're fit for the part. Let's talk. And they might say, Andy, yeah, I am. It's great, but I would like my co-designer to take the first step here, or I throw it over to them to decline first because they haven't had the opportunity and there's room for them to grow there. So all these kind of conversations happen around planning and individual one-on-ones, which happen once a fortnight, which is our sprintly cadence, fun enough, 2-week sprints we operate on. So it's very much an organic thing of, hey, you've worked on these types of projects before. Research, funny enough, those kind of projects are mentally taxing. And I've had it a number of times where my team members have come to me and said, Andy, can we cool down on a research project now? Because my brain doesn't have what it takes. And I'd rather get into the screen and actually do this type of project next. And, we do what we can and we massage that around and put somebody else on maybe a research task.
Does that tie back into the learning and development? Like if you put them onto a project and you realize maybe that they might need to invest a little bit more on the education around research and not jumping to solutions too quickly. Do you kind of feed that back to them to go, all right, look, we've realized there's something here. Maybe have you thought about this? Or do you allow them to come to that decision?
Good question. I think it differs based on the individual and any whatever point across the working year you might be. But if you're really dialed in and connected with your team and the projects they have going on, you can spot where those gaps are. Let's say where I sit in my role, I have conversations with product owners, product managers, and other leaders. And organically through conversations, you might drop in, hey, how's designer 2 getting on in your team? They're here to carry out said part of the job. How's that going? You might then read between the lines or pick up on a thread of, yeah, it was great, but we were expecting more. Okay, I'll take that back. And maybe I'll have I'll frame that in a conversation of, do we think there's room to grow here?
Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. I've learned so much about Learnosity, but also your leadership style. I love it. I align very closely with it, and I think it's something that we try and do with our team as well. So if anyone wants to connect with you directly, is the best way to connect with you via LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, yep, you can find me there. I don't think there's too many Andy Warboys out there, but I'm certainly one of a few.
I love your last name, by the way. Growing up with the last name Warboy, did you get a whole bunch of kudos just from having a cool name?
Do you know, there's a very small story here, but to cut it short, when I married my wife, I took her name. So her name was Warboys. So I grew up Crozier. That was my surname. So yeah, it was only 7-8 years ago now that I was Warboys. And yeah, people was like, Andy, you changed your name. Why? And then the story comes out like, dude, that's new age.
Did you do it by choice because you like the last name? It's like, I could dig this on my name. I'm going to go with Warboys.
I certainly wasn't. It came up the conversation a few times of like, would you consider? And I was like, I don't have a problem with it. Like, yeah, let's do it. So it wasn't a hard decision to make for me.
Well, that's cool. I was not expecting that as an answer, but I like it all the same. How new age of you.
Yeah, thanks.
Andy, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Cheers, Joe. Good to be here. Thanks a lot.
That's it for today's episode. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you hit subscribe. Also, leave us a comment and a like. It helps people like yourself find this video.